What's up folks, it's your man Ron Headback and welcome back to the DarkLab. This time we're going to be covering jungle and drum and bass with a lot of sneaky tricks. First up, we'll be taking Pattern Mutator to make new breaks for us like this. We'll be programming our own breaks with some sneaky synchronous tricks like this. We'll be pairing those breaks up with some smooth chords courtesy of Grain and Humana like this. We'll be pulverizing our breaks with Polar like this. And we'll be breathing life into some old samples with Mimic and Alligator like this. So let's dive in and I'll see you in the rack. Now, the Amen break has been around forever, well, since 1969 to be specific, and that was from Amen Brother by the Winstons. Now, just 6 seconds from that song had such a massive impact on music history, specifically with jungle. Now, in the early days, people were just using that break just as is, but then as the music was evolving, they began to kind of meticulously slice, chop, pitch, and rearrange all the elements within the break, and they made their entirely new breaks, and that's what we're going to be doing today. We're taking a bit of the old with Octarex and a bit of the new with Pattern Mutator, so we'll dive in and have a look. So starting out, what we have here is we have the Amen break in Octarex, so we'll just play that back. Even though it's old, that break never gets old. Now, you probably know that in Dr. Octarex, when you have a loop playing back, you can just hit the copy loop to track button. And what that does is you see in here how it transcribes all those slices in order that they occur within the sequencer. What you could do if you want to kind of mash around with breaks is you could be kind of, meticulously swapping those around. But that gets pretty old pretty quick. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Pattern Mutator do that for us. So if we come back to the rack and we'll just get that back into the sequencer again, and we're going to take an empty slot in a Pattern Mutator. We're going to hit record, and you're going to set your length to 64 and your rate to 16. And the reason we've got quite a big length is because we want to get as many variations as possible. So we'll just hit record there. So okay, that's recorded into Pattern Mutator. And then what you want to do is you put the swap up a touch and just the octave pitch just a tiny little bit. And then you just start mashing the mutate button and it's going to give you loads of variations like this. Let's just try another. And give it another hit. Now you'll notice some of them there, they just don't quite hit the mark. Like for example, here's ones that I'd done earlier. Number 1's the original, and then up to 6 is just variations. We'll just check that. Like, here's the original. So in those occasions where it's not quite hitting the mark, what you can actually do with that is you can send that back into the sequencer. So just click send to track. And if we come into the sequencer, you'll notice that it's taken the pattern mutated version of your break. And this is where you can kind of like, Pattern Mutator has done enough randomization for us rather than us meticulously juggling slots around. But here, if just there was like one part that you weren't too sure about, like for example, that little double hit there, I could kind of take that out. And then if I like, I could come back into pattern mutator once more, find an empty slot, just clear this one, and then I could just be recording that right back in. So there you go, and I could start mashing mutate again and just like bringing endless variations to the Amen break, as if there weren't enough already, but you can get more. So that's pretty cool. And another thing that you can do with adding to the variation mutating madness is when you do find a whole bunch that you like, and you might sort of get them in order, you maybe put some of them back into sequencer and tweak them, you can just hit red automation. So you could just come in here, double click, and that's going to make a little instance of the pattern switch. Say pattern number 1, we can put like pattern 4, put like pattern 3, have like pattern 2, and then you could do like little micro slices. You could be down into quarters, and you could just be like switching those as well. Let's take back to 1 and then put on to like 5 or something like that. And then you can just play that back, and that's going to be switching the patterns back and forth like so. So that's pretty cool. It doesn't always hit out, because you're going to be taking just, your different breaks, putting them in, and then, okay, that one works. You'll probably stick with it. You don't have to go too far with mutation madness. But as I say, that's giving you way more variations on the Amen break than you would have been able to do normally. But rather than just sticking with the Amen break all the time, let's move on and look at making our own breaks in Kong and drum sequencer. Okay, now having a look at our own break, because using the Amen break all the time, I think it's been used a little bit too much in the past, so we'll make our own breaks. But that was just a kind of sample for you to kind of start off for doing your own switching back and forth. Now, what we have here is just kind of taking our little kit, and we've got our kick, something really boxy, have the snare from Amen break, so I'm recycling some of it. Some nice 808 hats. We're going to have some kind of crazy bongos. Oh, like that. I've called this one Tonk Tonk. And bonk. And then we have, just as I've done with the garage video that I've done, it's all about the off snares. Here's a kind of high snare, and that's complementing our snare. Quite a kind of different sound there. So when you're programming jungle or drum and bass, is you really are going to have to use the pattern switches. There's no way that you could get a decent enough break into just 16 steps. So what I've done here is you'll see that I'm doing a whole bunch of pattern switches. I'm cycling through 3 specifically, kind of juggling backwards and forth between them. So we'll just have a look at what we're actually doing. We'll have just our kick in the Amen snare. Now that's kind of sounding a bit stilted, because we're going to have to get some hats in there, and then also add in our high snare and our low snare, like so. So if you just check out here. Now you'll notice that there's just a little something missing on step 2, 3. So what we'll do here, this is where the kind of bongo sound comes in. And just see how they're kind of accentuating the break. And last but not least, if you were a drum and bass or jungle fan back in the day, I mean, it still gets used a lot, is that sound. God knows where it comes from, but it's tattooed on every junglist's brain. So we'll just play this all back complete. Now you might be asking yourself, what's that kind of crazy, squirty, kind of like filter type effect that's going on there with the break? Because I'm not doing anything in drum sequencer. But what that is I'm using Synchronous. Now, Synchronous is pretty cool for kind of, it's LFO based filter, delay, and reverb modulation. And in this case, I'm just using 1 and 3. And number 3, that's controlling reverb. And then number 1, that's controlling quite aggressively the filter. It's just coming up, dropping down, kind of making a crazy effect. But what I'm also doing with that is, here's the break just on its own. That's doing nothing for me. You know, it just sounds a bit staid. So this is, I'm doing some automation on the solo of my Synchronous channel and also on the volume level. So you'll see what's happening here if I just take these side by side. And what we've got is some automation coming in here, and what it's going to do is channel 4 level will be boosted up and channel 4 solo will be up, because we just want to cut out the clean version and just have that effect coming out like so. So that's a pretty cool effect. I mean, this one that I'm using, it was actually one of the stock Synchronous effects, just dropped it in there, and I killed number channel 2, and then number 1, I just played around with the frequency a little bit there. And, you know, I'll agree, it's a pretty interesting effect. But let's move on to creating some other effects, and this time I'll be doing it in Octarex using, again, pattern mutated breaks. So we see what that's like. Now, just having bare breaks is just no fun, and as you saw a moment ago, how with adding that Synchronous effect, I can add some kind of nice squelches to what's going on with the end of your break. And what I'm doing here is very similar to the first technique. I'd taken, it's called the JB break, and have a listen to that just on its own. Because it's a nice short break, got loads of really good pattern mutations for this. Again, just the same thing, recorded it into pattern mutator, a little bit of swap, a little bit of octave and pitch, and some really good variations. But what I want to do is, you may or may not know, there was a really good track called the Helicopter Tune, and also there was Terminator by Roughage Crew, and they had this kind of effect. It was using a lot of jungle tracks where, because time stretching was so prevalent, they would be taking the break and pitching it up but keeping tempo, and of course Rex just does that perfectly. So a way we can kind of do that is you can be editing the automation of your loop transpose. So if we have a look here, what I'm doing is I'm taking the loop transpose just at base value 0, and then up by 3, up by 6, and up by 9. So we'll just hear what that sounds like. Now, of course, doing that technique, it sounds kind of okay like that as is, but a better way of doing that is with Polar. So what I'll do here, and you can download this combinator and tear it apart, see what's going on. We've got here pitching, sorry. And what we have is Polar, and we're going to have very similar technique. We're going to be taking shifter 2, editing the automation of that, and the same kind of thing. I'm starting, in this case, 7 semis, 10, 12, 14, and then dropping back down. So I'll just check what that's like. And the thing that you might want to do with that is just to kind of get it really roughneck kind of sound, is we have Pulveriser here. And this is just, it's one of the factory presets. It's called Basic Pulverization. And here, this is just a far rougher sound that you can be using. So that would be an interesting thing that you can use as a break from your breaks. You just have your plain break going on, and then just as you're stopping in your song, let's just do something crazy and different with a beat, and then return to the original break so that everyone's kind of making the return home to the break that they liked. So here is another effect that we can do. I kind of called this one Grunter. If we just go and check this, enable that. And again, we're using Polar. And what I'm doing here is it's just very basic shifter 2 semis. I'm hooking that up to a pulsar. As always, pulsar. The Swiss Army knife of reason. I can't stop using it. What we're going to do is an LFO1. We're going to bring that into pitch shift 2. And that is on a sawtooth with a rate of 8.4 and not going too mad with the level, but 37%. And you kind of hear what that's doing. Surely you agree that's quite a departure from just that, you know. So there's some kind of crazy, more junglist kind of breaks. So with that given, we've just focused just on the beat side of things, but let's go in and see about pairing something up with this. Now, a staple of jungle and drum and bass tracks is those kind of nice ethereal kind of chords going on in the background. So I'll just kind of check what's going on here. Just matching up nicely the contrast of the kind of hard breaks and then just the softness of the chords. All right, this is coming to us courtesy of Grain. Drop any sample in Grain. It sounds awesome. If you're not using Grain for your samples, I'd recommend you use it. Give it a go. What we have here is, of all things, we're having Humana. Because what we're going to do with Humana is just kind of have a slight kind of female lead coming over the top, and we'll just see what that's like. And we're getting that effect by running the Humana through Alligator. And this is just very simple. I've just chosen one of the patterns that just kind of happened to stick, and I'm banging up the delay and just very minimal change on the high pass, band pass, and low pass, nothing else tweaking. And then that in itself is being run through into Transgate. And so what we have here, and you might say, well, I don't have Transgate. Get on over to the Reason Studios store, and the whole kilohertz effects bundle is available for free. So you can get it. You can download this combinator. Once you go and grab it, you can grab this too. And what that's doing is we're gating our gate. Now, what we have is with Alligator, I put this down on resolution 1/8, and I just shifted it a bit because as it is, the gates were occurring at the same time. So I kind of wanted the gate being gated, so to speak. And we'll just see what that's like. I've put in another couple of controls here, and that is the gate release. And you'll hear what that's doing with the effect of the gate. It's a touch more staccato, but as soon as we make it longer, and how they're beginning to kind of meld into each other. Now, what we also have is just a swap between 16 and 32. And for that, that's just going to be changing the resolution of the transgate there. So instead of 16 steps, that'll be jumping to 32, like so. And I've also put in there for the patterns so that you can kind of switch in between the different transgate patterns that are in there, or like have a go at making your own ones. They're real simple, just like you're wanting notes on, notes off. It's a very handy tool for like visualization of your actual gates. So that's me just twisting the P on for pattern, and that's just giving us different resolutions. So like so. So that kind of having the original chord just on its own, and then bringing in a bit of the Humana vocal if you're wanting to build up tension and things. Now that would be okay if we want to build tension, but I have another video on instrumentation, and here's another little instrumentation technique for you. Is that would be okay for making a kind of sense of anticipation, but if we really wanted to roar things in, what we can do here is got Faithful Thor, like so. Bring this up a touch. That is the sound you want, and what I'm doing with that is you'll see in sequences here. You can do this in the sequencer if you don't have sequences, but there's just my chords, and that's G, F sharp, and D sharp. Exact same here. And then what I'm doing is I've taken that down a whole octave. So we'll just kind of check and see what that sounds like. So you go a nice little bit of instrumentation there. You're getting 3 different sounds just from the same chords that are going on there, and vastly contrasting and complementing each other. So we're going to maybe want a little something extra in on top of this, so we'll move on to the next sound. Okay, we're going to want to take things a little bit in a more old school direction here, and that's kind of having nice ravey stabs, but we're going to breathe a bit of life into some old samples, and this is a really old sample. Here we go. I think everyone knows that sound. It's been used so many times in different places. If anyone knows where that sound comes from, tell me, because I need to know. And this is like a really old sample, and just to kind of, it may be embarrassing to admit this, but when I went and dug this out of my old sample library, I was kind of like, why does it have such a short name? It's only 6 characters. I was like, okay. Way back, I used to have a sound card that you could only fit 6 character file names in it. I was like, how old is this file? So had a look, and yep, created and modified in 1995. So it's almost as old as Jungle, but not as old as me, maybe, who knows. But what I'm going to do with this is, we don't want to use that just as is. So we're using Mimic here. And what I've done with this is I'm enabling the loop, and I'm shortening the loop length there a touch. Because you'll notice here, just kind of cut it very short. When you've got short stabs like this, this is an interesting thing, is enable the loop with a very short loop, you get it's almost kind of like a strange elongation kind of reverb sound. So we could be using it like that. But because we're trying to take something a bit old school and making it a bit kind of new school, is what we're doing is we're going to take this through Alligator. Again, Alligator, just can't stop using it because it's such a multi-purpose tool. And playing quite a lot on the bandpass here, quite high up in the LFO amount, knocking up a lot of the delay on the high pass and bandpass as well. And also we're kind of 16th and we're enabling the shuffle in that. And then this gets run through the echo, like so. What this is doing is reasonable amount of feedback, and that is on 1/8. So from going from that kind of cheesy rave stab that was like this, enable this and the echo, and now we're getting far more kind of like dark core kind of sound, that style, and that pairs up just perfectly with our breaks. So you can download this one and that really old sample as well. Nothing fancy here in terms of the control. I've got like a one called There Can Be Only One, and that's just because the only thing I'm really going to do here is with the frequency, because it's just such a good sample. But then running it through Alligator, giving it a kind of modern touch. Only thing I really want to do with it is filter it, so that'll be kind of like so. So there you go, just a really old cheesy sample and just turning it into something far more complimentary for the song. So we'll just move on to the last finishing touch on this. So no jungle or D&B track is complete without some vocal samples going on there. Now, I was kind of like, should I tell people where I got these from? They're really, really old samples, but if you Google up Blue Mar 10 and Jungle Jungle, you'll find that there's a sample pack that you can buy, and it has just collected all those old classic jungle sounds. Just they've all been used so many times, and I sometimes use them for garage tracks as well. So we'll just kind of go through them. For example,
6 million ways to die.
If you like jungle and you don't know that sample, I don't know where you've been. Here's another old faithful. Again, that one, I don't know where it comes from, but if you know, tell me. So what I usually do with vocal samples is, rather than, when I kind of want to get an idea down really quick, is rather than kind of maybe putting things into an NXT or NA19, is I'll put in a whole bunch of vocal samples into a Kong and then run it into an Akai MPD 18. It's just like for triggering the loops, and I can just hit and see where they're coming in, okay? And then if I want to kind of record them, I can just do it very, very quickly rather than jumping into the sequencer and such like. So what I'm doing here is quarter speed on both of these, and we're having like that one coming in there, and you'll see how that's just complementing things really nicely. Thanks. So there you go. Hopefully this is giving you lots of kind of new tips and techniques if you're going to be writing jungle. And it's not just applicable to this genre. You could be using that whole pattern cut-ups idea with Pattern Mutator and any Rex loop. You could just bang it on in there, record it, have things juggled around, and you'll be really surprised at the kind of like different results you can get. And similarly with, you know, old kind of samples that you've got in there, I'm sure everyone's got these kind of like older samples that you've heard and you're thinking, that gets used too much, it gets used in too many places, but you can kind of breathe something new into it. So I hope this gives you many reasons for using Reason. My name's Ron Headback, and I'll catch you in the next side. Peace.